Welcome to Surviving the Side Hustle podcast, the place where expert-based business owners learn how to build momentum, avoid burnout, and create sustainable success on their own terms. I'm your host, Rob Tracy, strength and conditioning specialist turned founder and CEO of Prime Performance Coaching, the personal performance strategy firm for high-achieving business owners and operators. I partner with driven entrepreneurs to implement the Prime Performance process, an awareness-based operating system that's helped me and countless solopreneurs and small business owners evolve from just being high performers on the edge of burnout to prime performers building sustainable success. The impact of Prime Performance process has led me here, where I'll show you how to get unstuck and design your own Prime Performance life without sacrificing your health, relationships, or sanity. So whether you're hustling after hours or scaling your passion project, today and here, you're going to get real stories, science-backed strategies, and practical frameworks to help you excel every step of your journey. It's time. Let's get intentional, build momentum, and become prime performers together. We'll get started just after this message. If you're an ambitious business owner or side hustler who's ready for a breakthrough, tired of spinning your wheels, looking to slide past burnout and build real momentum, I'd love to invite you to book a free Prime Performance Strategy session with me or one of our strategists. This is your chance to get personalized insight on what's been holding you back and get a clear path to move forward. No fluff, just actionable strategy. So if you're interested, visit survivingthesidehustle.com/free call to request your spot now. Again, that's survivingthesidehustle.com/free call. Looking forward to helping you become a prime performer. What's going on, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Surviving the Side Hustle. I hope you're excited, or just as excited as I am, because today's guest is calling in all the way from Switzerland. She's been bringing a concept that I think a lot of high performers need to hear. Our guest today is Meggi Rombach. Did I say that correct?
Yes, well done.
All right. And she is a former corporate leader turned coach and podcast host of Played by Rules. So make sure you go check that out after this episode. And I'm excited to have her on because after experiencing burnout, not once, but twice, she stepped away from that traditional script and began building what she calls a mindful rebellion. Today's conversation is going to be awesome because we're looking to kind of dive into breaking the rules, but doing it consciously. It's about redefining performance, rewriting old stories, and learning how to show up in a way that actually sustains your success instead of destroying it. So, welcome to the show.
Pleasure to be here. So excited to dive into it with you.
Awesome. And yeah, I'd love to just kind of kick right off into it. In a previous conversation that you and I had, you had mentioned that you've worked with high-level leaders for years. So I want to ask, what originally pulled you into leadership and coaching?
So I haven't coached for so long. So I worked alongside high-level leaders for a long time in different functions. So I was first in brand management for a couple of years. And then for the last 15 years, I was with the Red Cross, with the Geneva-based part of the Red Cross, the International Committee of the Red Cross. And I was managing partnerships. And in that function, I was engaging with very high-level leaders, sometimes really C-level of big blue chip companies. So I've been exposed to very high-level people. I wouldn't say I was the highest rank, but I could really see from very close what it takes. Also, how even the top guys, they're still human beings. They have their own struggles. And that was really enriching to see, and also see their vulnerabilities, which also made me want to support them in whatever way I could, which is where I'm heading now.
Yeah. And I mean, what a great way to kind of kick things off, because I think that's so important to remember. A lot of times, at least for myself, and I know a lot of individuals that I work with, when they take that step into entrepreneurship, they kind of don't feel like they're up to bat. They see all these successful versions of people on Instagram and LinkedIn and all these other big name people, and they kind of forget that they're also human too. And I remember one time when I first met one of my mentors or role models, I was like, wow, this guy has real life problems. He's a real human. And I think that's important to remember. So thank you for sharing that and kicking it off there. And I know you started your podcast because of a LinkedIn newsletter idea, if I'm not mistaken. So what made you
Yes.
take that leap?
Yes, so I wanted first I had a blog, and then I just felt like it's not the best way to connect also with people. So that's why I was like, let's play with the rules of LinkedIn and let's rather go for a LinkedIn newsletter. And part of that newsletter, I wanted to talk to leaders. I wanted to do that for a long time. So initially I called my podcast Leadership Insights. And the idea was that I felt I was so privileged to have been like I was mentored by many amazing leaders, have a few role models that I kind of followed from close or far. And I felt I got this firsthand guidance and insights and wisdom from them. And I thought it'd be nice to bring that to more people. So I started out talking to really diverse leaders. And when I say leaders, I'm not talking about the C guy in the big blue chip. For me, leaders are people that have ideas, that lead forward. Any entrepreneur that works on something really cool for me is a leader too. So you don't have to have all the stripes on your shoulder for me, in my definition, to be a leader. So I talked to these amazing guys. And then I noticed in those conversations that most leaders don't have just one story. Most of them pivoted more than once in their careers. And that's also when then a year later, I lost my job and I started my own transition. And that's also when I kind of started changing the podcast a little bit, and I rebranded it last summer under the new theme, Played by Your Rules. And that's where also this whole idea of mindful rebellion emerged. Because when I say played by your rules, it's not like an anarchy type of rebellion. It's really the rebellion against the old script, all these rules and the shoulds we've been handed down, and to dare to find your own rules and your own voice. So it's that kind of, I always say I'm a people pleaser. This is people pleaser gone rebel energy. It's a kind rebellion.
Yeah, yeah, I like that. And so where was the first burnout? Where did that kind of come into this timeline? Was
That
that
was way
beforehand?
before.
Yeah.
So I started my career in corporate, big multinational. And that's where I had my first burnout. That was really high competitive corporate environment. But actually it wasn't even to do with a high competitive environment. Had to do with the relationship with my direct manager. And then again, end 2023, I had another burnout. And actually after the second burnout, I got really curious because I could see patterns between the two cases. Both times I was actually really high performing. I was doing a great job, but I didn't get the appreciation from my direct boss, or maybe I didn't get what I wanted to get, because they were cool people. I can't even blame it on them. So it had probably more to do with me and my story than with them. So I was very dependent on external validation. And that got me to that place. And realizing that led also to this mindful rebellion, because I realized if we don't find the strength and the recognition in ourselves, we are very dependent on others giving us that recognition. So the whole art is to find that self-confidence and be less dependent on external validation, which is easier said than done. But voila, that was kind of what I took away from those painful experiences that I had to go through.
Yeah, and I resonate a lot with that too, because I had a pretty serious stint with burning out, and I quickly scaled my book of business up to a point where I was working like averaging around 15 hours a day, 7 days a week for 3 years, no days off kind of thing. And as I was going through that, I realized that I was chasing what I call this shadow success, which was this external validation. I almost needed to go through that and realize that I was doing all this people pleasing and putting my clients before my own basic needs and stuff. So I was constantly tripping myself up, and I would use the guise of like, okay, yeah, this is for my business. This is the success that I want. So this is just what I have to do. But at the same time, it was also breaking me down. So I want to ask you, because you work with a lot of leaders and specifically high achievers is how common do you think that this pattern of like over delivering and people pleasing is with these high achievers?
I mean, what I'm just realizing listening to you is, I mean, I work with many high achievers, very intelligent people. They're really, went to really good schools, started a career, they've really been giving all and everything for the last 15, 20 years of their careers. And now they reached a level where they go like, okay, right, I don't need to climb that ladder anymore. What I hadn't realized until now, because I'm a people pleaser and I always felt like that's just me. I'm a people person. I'm super empathetic. I felt that was just my issue. But listening to you, I'm realizing probably there are many more people pleasers out there. And this whole combination, and I'm going to pay more attention if I see that really as a pattern, because intuitively I feel there is actually this combination of high achieving and people pleasing, because we people pleasers, we care about also our customers, about bringing results. That's why we're so good, right?
Hmm.
But that's also why it's so hard on ourselves. So I don't know yet. I mean, I hadn't had that. I mean, yes, they were clearly high achievers, but the people pleaser element, I'll be paying attention to that. We might be onto something there.
Yeah, yeah. And one of my mentors, his name is Brett Bartholomew, and he talks a lot about this term that I think he kind of came up with around social agility and being able to adapt and kind of read rooms and being able to adjust and create influence around different situations and such. And I feel like to a certain degree, the people pleasing that I had gone through and kind of continued, like that allowed me to be more adaptable. And I think going back to what you said earlier on leaders, and especially these higher level leaders, is they don't just pivot once when there's a setback or a challenge, they pivot multiple times. And I think that the people pleasing trait, I guess you could say, helped me become more adaptable. So when things didn't go the right way, I was able to kind of move and change through. So I'm interested, did you see similar things like that as well for yourself?
Yeah. And also, I mean, there are even leadership concepts. I very early in my career, I had an amazing leader who now is leading one top company in the US. And he introduced me to that concept of servant leadership. And you even have it as part of the concept. The whole idea of servant leadership is to serve others. I mean, maybe not to the extent of people pleasing, but I think it's a fine line to walk to cut that. So yes, no, certainly I personally experienced that. I mean, I really had to learn the hard way to sometimes put myself also first, but not in an egoistic way. Like they say in the planes, sometimes you have to put on your own oxygen mask first to be able to be a better leader, a better manager, to actually help your team. But I felt somehow I don't have the right to do that. It sounds maybe stupid, but I felt I really have to first and foremost be there for the others. And then I actually did a leadership training at the Red Cross. It was a great 3-year program that we did in parallel to the day work. And one part of that training involved peer feedback or feedback from the full team. And I heard from everybody around me kind of, you gotta look more after yourself, because I was really stressed at that time. So I was also very short tempered. And when you do that, then you can be better here for us. And for me, that was amazing because somehow I needed that permission. And once I heard that from not just one person, but from 3 or 4, I was like, okay, actually, I should be doing that, not only for myself, but because everybody is better off. But it's hard to come to that point. I don't know if you had a similar experience, but for me, that was really hard to allow myself to say I put myself first sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of built or created, I guess, what I would consider like the perfect concoction for burnout because my entire identity up to that point of building that book of business up, it was background in sports. It was all sports performance and teams and leading these teams and degree of competition. You can usually see more success by just grinding it out and just kind of enduring more and just kind of push, 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 push. And I did play in like the college and university level, but I didn't go further than that. So that I could
What did you
push.
play?
So in high school, I did football, wrestling, and lacrosse. And then in college for undergrad, I did football and then I shifted over to rugby. And I'd seen a certain degree of success through all of those different sports, winning a state championship in rugby and section championships for football and all these other things. And so that's all I knew. Once I shifted into entrepreneurship, I knew, oh, okay, all I got to do is just grind a little bit harder, just hustle a little bit harder for a little bit longer than the next guy and just push, 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 push. And I created this identity that I just continued to lean on, and then also chasing that external validation. So I was just push, 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 push. And I think that's what really led me to that burnout so fast. And as I'm doing a lot of my research, I'm finding out that burnout is really coming through when your speed that you're operating outpaces the direction and clarity that you have. And chasing the wrong success led me to that route pretty quickly. So I want to ask you though.
Hang on, just let me jump in there because I think
Sure.
that's super interesting and two things come up. So one thing I realized also that it's linked to chronic and acute stress. Because
Mhm.
actually acute stress, which often happens in sports, it's actually good. You have a peak performance and then you rest. But what really works you up is chronic stress. Like this little itchy thing that just doesn't stop. Often the little toxic things at work. So that's much worse. But also, you're a sports guy. I'm using a lot of sports analogies. So my sports are horse riding, I'm skiing, I run a few half marathons. I ran one full marathon, but it was probably the one and only. So I often also compared with running, because in running, when you train for a marathon, you plan for the breaks, right? You don't just go running every day, I don't know how many miles. You part of your training plan is to have proper rest. And at work, we don't do that. We just think we can go full steam the whole time.
Yeah. And where do you think that concept comes from?
Good question. I think it's, as you said, I think it's also, now social media is even worse. It's also this whole image of you have to be strong. I started actually my first internship I did in management consulting. I did part of my undergraduate degree in Spain, in Madrid, and it was at the time one of the top universities there. After that, I chose to go into brand management, which was kind of the lifestyle choice because everybody else went into investment banking or consulting. And there it was kind of cool to work 70 hours a week. There was just also this kind of wrong culture where this whole overworking, over delivering was valued and was expected. And I feel now with the younger generations, and you're probably a younger generation from me, I feel like there's more expectation for work-life balance. People are pushing back a bit earlier. Back at the day, it was kind of the cool thing to say. I worked also at Procter and Gamble for a while, and we would, when it was business review time of the year, we would be proud to say we ordered some pizzas and stayed up all night to finish the business review. And I was like, that was just nuts. Why would we do that?
Yeah, yeah. And I, again, totally relate to that as well. And going back to how I was sharing it, like I was seeking this attention from everybody, but I was working, 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 working. And I almost like would get pleasure or like a reward in my brain where I'd be like, no, like when people would reach out to me to go to a party or something, I'd be like, no, I can't. I have to work. I have clients and stuff, and I'm busy. And then that eventually just snowballed into something that I couldn't like turn around. And then when I had an opportunity to say, hey, I do want to go hang out with some friends, everybody was gone because I had pushed away for so long. And yeah, and I agree with you. Like I'm starting to see more and more people kind of going against this hustle culture that today's like society has created, or I guess yesterday's society has created. But I want to get your take on what are the biggest differences between that hustle culture and what sustainable high performance looks like to you?
So for me, sustainable, what I observe is around midlife, people come to a point where they really, not necessarily midlife, but something at one point you hit the wall. You mentioned you were close to burnout. I had a burnout. I also had a pretty serious health issue. As soon as you hit more or less, let's say between 40, 55, there's some point where you basically ticked a lot of boxes. So you reach certain success on paper and you hit somehow the head against the wall, whether it's a burnout or a health challenge or whatever, a divorce, I don't know, something shakes your life up. And then you start questioning that whole culture because you realize this is not sustainable, because sooner or later it'll cost your health or your relationships or something. And also you realize actually you achieved enough. It's also you realize, okay, how much further do I want to go? Actually, the analogy I'm using in my coaching, my communication now, I compare that stage to Everest Base Camp. Everest Base Camp is at over 4,000 meters altitude. I don't know what that is in miles of feet or whatever you count it, but it's high, right? And not everybody makes it to Everest Base Camp. Once you're at base camp, you have to choose. Do you want to go up all the way to the summit? If you do, you have to change gears. You need an oxygen mask, and even if you do, the air is so much thinner up there. And then anyway, how long are you going to stay up there? So once you realize that, you're like, okay, if that's not my path, what is it? Basically people are done with climbing. And then either they try to make it more comfortable at base camp, and that's when they really put their boundaries, they look after their well-being, or they even say, I'm done with climbing, now I go, I don't know, sailing, and they do something completely different. So I feel there's also something about life stages. And also what I observe, our dreams change every 10 years or so. So because what I also see with people I work with, they almost feel like they betray themselves if they want something different now than what they wanted 10 years ago. I mean, when I moved into the Red Cross 15 years ago, that was like a dream come true. And I wouldn't give away any day I spent with that organization. But then it was also okay to move on because my dreams and my plans, they changed, and that's okay. So I think it's also really important to normalize that success will not be the same throughout your life. Maybe that's what you need to do in your 20s, to go full steam and see how high you can push. But at one point, it's important to say, okay, that's good enough for me.
Well, hopefully, because that's exactly what I did. And you're so right about like the goals changing and such. So like when I was in that burnout phase, I was only driven by the financial gain. And I was like, okay, more, 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 more. And what really turned things around for me was losing my dad. And then him passing away, and him talking for years about just being excited to retire and just kind of hang out. And then he got sick with pancreatic cancer, and it came on or we found out so late that it was almost too late to do anything. And he passed away quickly after. And I just went right back to the grind. I just hustled, hustled, hustled. And then another year later is when it finally clicked on me. And I was like, I'm grinding harder and faster than my dad was. And he never even got to get to doing the thing that he wanted to do. So I was like, this is definitely time for me to change. And I'm much less financially driven. I still understand the importance of making more money and creating more impact and everything around that, which is still continuing to grow. But new goals for me is like, okay, how do I grow my coaching into a bigger firm now? How do I bring on new coaches, new other team members and stuff like that? How do I build that up to create a shared success? So I really love how you tied those together there about the changing different seasons and also the goals and such too.
So, I'm so convinced my dream is to make the mindful rebellion a movement. And what I notice with many podcasts I'm coming on, there are many of us that are in a similar space. People that hit a wall, that now try to help others to maybe also avoid that painful place, to get the turn quicker. And I used to be head of partnerships for 15 years at the Red Cross. So I think we should all connect with each other and amplify our voices so that we can reach more people.
Yeah, I totally agree. And what's something interesting? I was having a conversation the other day with somebody, and they were coming to me saying they had a unique and interesting situation where he was in an opportunity to kind of step in and help somebody not trip or make these mistakes. And he was kind of weighing back and forth because it came with a certain risk. And I remember sitting back and kind of thinking and sharing with him. I was half joking around, but now that I'm thinking back on it, I was kind of more serious. I told him like, hey, dude, like part of the human experience is not only chasing after those peaks of top of Everest, but also experiencing those valleys too. And maybe that's something that he needs to just learn and go through himself. Like that's an experience where he can learn a strong lesson, and maybe that's what he needs to do.
Absolutely. It's not funny, but in a way it's ironic, not even ironic. It's really deep that you say that, because I do remember maybe, I don't know, 10, 15 years, at some point, I felt like I had it too easy. I felt like, yes, I had my little challenges, but I'm from a small town in Germany. I'm from a middle class family with 3 kids. Yes, we had some struggles between siblings, but all in, it was a pretty smooth ride. And then similar, like at one point, first my mom had breast cancer, but she completely, she recovered. It was 20 years ago, never came back. But still, that was, of course, a shock to the system. And I got sick for a while, I think that's when I had the first burnout. There was just suddenly within a 2-year span, it just felt like it was hitting me from all sides. And now looking back, I needed that valley. Like sometimes you grow most when you hit ground. And then it's all about how you get out of it. Actually, I think it's maybe not a good thing, but it's an important thing for our growth that we get to a point where we need to question where we're heading and kind of restart and reset.
Yeah, I think that's beautifully said. And I think when you kind of hit that new ground, I think this is a great segue into because there's so much more opportunity and change, and like you can kind of pivot in different directions. And I know you say that people often perform better when they define their own rules. And I want to ask you a little bit about that and like how maybe when you're in those valleys, you can kind of rewrite different stories and changing your trajectory.
Yeah. So I think when you're in the valley, there's actually one book I'm almost bringing up always because I think it's so powerful. It's by William Bridges. It's called Transitions. And in that book, what he talks about is when you go through a transition, the first important thing is to mark the ending. And then what we typically do is we rush into the new beginning. But what is more powerful to do, to spend time in the neutral zone. This is like the messy bit in the middle, the valley or whatever you call it, to really allow yourself to feel that messiness and to not know for a moment where to go. And that's also where it connects it to the rules, because it's easy to say play it by your rules, but what's the challenge of that? You have to know what your rules are.
Mm.
So first you have to find out, okay, where do I want to head now? So in my work now, what I do first is to reset the compass, to redefine the North Star, because that will define your rules. And maybe where you want to head next is not where you were heading so far. So first, it's really all about getting that clarity. And then I dig around a little bit and see if there's some old scripts to break. So I really feel like, I believe deeply that I found and broke that script that led me to burnout. And only when you do that, you can be free, because then you can really say, okay, now I have a blank piece of paper. Now I can say, okay, what are my rules going forward? So then you can set your rules, and then you have to establish them and reinforce them, which again is not easy. And the way I do that is what I call lifestyle prototyping. Like you don't try to just change everything overnight, but you start with little experiments. You start a side hustle, you just try a little bit something, or do you go on a few podcasts, or you just basically put your toe into the water and you see how it feels. And then you slowly adapt and increase and change. Because what I noticed, if we try to make a huge change at once, we don't, because it's too big and it's too intimidating, and we don't have the courage to do that. And courage doesn't come from just blindly jumping. It comes from small actions. So that's why I deeply believe like taking small actions, learning, adapting, that's a much more sustainable way to make a big change
Mm.
than to just jump out of the plane without parachute.
Yeah, I love that. And I love bringing up the courage too, because it reminds me, I heard somebody recently the other day saying how courage and confidence are very similar. It's just that confidence feels good and courage doesn't feel good. And that's where like that growth really comes into play, because you're accepting that, yeah, this is going to be challenging. This is going to be difficult. I'm not really certain if this is going to work out or not, but you still take that action anyways. And I think taking those small, courageous steps builds that confidence and leads to it. So I love that there. Hey, sorry for the interruption. It's me, Rob, and I hope you're enjoying today's conversation. But I wanted to remind you, if you're a driven entrepreneur or an expert-based business owner who wants to get unstuck, create sustainable momentum, and really start moving forward, I've got a free resource just for you. You can download my 5 keys to clarity and momentum. It's a PDF guide. It's a quick read, and it'll help you cut through the noise, clarify your next steps, and start building the systems that you need for sustainable success. So if you're new here or if you haven't grabbed it yet, this is the first step to applying these principles in your own journey. So head over to survivingthesidehustle.com/5keys and download your free copy today. Again, that's survivingthesidehustle.com/5keys.
Can I just jump in there? Because I find that super interesting. Because so my whole idea was to work on clarity, courage, and confidence so they come together. But I learned to love courage. I find it exhilarating. And I learned that, amongst other things, through public speaking. So I got into a Toastmaster club, which I think is a pretty big thing in the US too.
Mm-hmm.
And that was quite scary at the beginning. And I learned a new word, that exciting, which by definition is the mix of scary and exciting, because in the body, it's the same feeling. It's the same. You have like sweaty head, your heart races. And once you understand that, not about, if you reframe it from I'm scared to I'm excited, suddenly courage becomes more fun.
Yeah, I love that. And that's powerful to know too, because I don't think enough people realize that it is essentially the same emotion. It's just all about that framing and looking at it through there. But I really want to kind of get into talking a little bit more about the mindful rebellion. I know we had mentioned it a few times. You're saying that you want this to become a massive movement. Can you share a little bit about where it's at right now and kind of where you're moving with that?
So there's a few bits that got me to that point. So first, I discovered my own rebel energy. And that was actually through a assessment tool that was originally used for NASA astronauts. It's called PCM, Process Communication Modeling. And one of the communication styles is rebel energy. And apparently this is my main style at this phase of my life. And I was like, yes, I take it. Because the whole rebel energy is more about the playfulness, the fun side, about, and I felt like I was missing fun and lightness in my life for a while. So I could really relate to that. So I started digging more, and I found a really excellent book by a Yale researcher called Rebel Talent, who also looked into how rebels perform better at work, because rebels dare to speak up, they share their ideas, they feel more engaged. So for leaders, instead of being afraid that their people might rebel, they should encourage it, because that leads to more innovation, to more employee engagement, and ultimately to more retention. So it's like, oh my God, I'm onto something. But then I also noticed particularly in this whole burnout space, there are many people that are harmony coaches or wellness coaches and all of that. And that's great. But I wanted to bring it together, because for me, what I see with particularly high performers, leaders, that have been full speed their whole life. They don't just want to go completely Zen and meditation only. They still want to have an impact. So that's why I married them. So for me, the mindful rebellion, it's a kind rebellion, primarily against this old script, the old limiting beliefs, in a mindful way. And a lot of my tools are also inspired by mindfulness tools. So this is not just like meditating. I mean, meditation is great. I recommend it to everybody. But I also did a really interesting training where we used meditation and other time management tools to trigger the state of flow intentionally. This flow in the concept of this wonderful Czech gentleman that I cannot pronounce the name, Michael, very complicated surname. I can look it up. I have to finally learn it. But basically, there's this whole concept of flow, like these moments when you're zoomed in into your work and it's just time is flying and you're just super efficient. So actually, you can use meditation and some other tools to trigger. Basically, you marry meditation and time management tools to get more intentionally into that state of flow. And that's just super powerful, because suddenly, yes, you have a better balance, but you're still having a good impact, and you can still move mountains, because if that's what you've done all your life, you don't want to suddenly just slow down and be a yoga instructor. I mean, maybe some people do, and that's great, but many people want to keep a bit of the energy and the achievements, but just in a healthier way.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with that. And at least I'm in that ballpark where I don't want to just kind of roll over and just kind of give up. And my girlfriend kind of hates it sometimes because we've gone on vacation. And I know after like a few days, I can hang out, chill, and have a margarita or two by the pool. But after a while, I'm excited. I want to get back to it. And just the other day, it was like a Sunday night and I was just amped up and I was ready because I had an exciting week. I had a lot of things I wanted to do. And she was like, I think you're the only one who's excited for Monday. And I was like,
You
no.
know, my partner, he's like that. He loves his job. And Sunday evening, he's like, oh, should I stop working? I was slightly like, no, 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 wait till Monday. But yeah, but that's great, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah. Yes, it is. And I wanna ask you a little bit about the coaching because you had mentioned the three C's, clarity, confidence, and courage. But I'm interested to hear kind of what does the journey look like? What does it look like working with you?
So I have three C's and three F's. This is me from my marketing background. So the three C's, clarity, courage, and confidence, lead to the three F's, which are freedom, flow, and fun. So that's kind of ultimately what I want to give people, that they can perform still, but with more lightness, and also bring some fun back into work. You know, it doesn't always have to be so serious, right? And the way I do it is essentially I work on the how and on the what. So the how, what I mean by that is mindset mastery, to really manage your mindset. That's also where I'm taking leaders out of their head and back into their body. And one way I'm doing that, and I haven't set that up fully, but I started testing it recently, is through horse facilitated coaching. I mean, horses are amazing animals to mirror your emotions.
Mm.
So I'm planning to work more with horses. And the other bit I'm exploring is climbing. Climbing is for courage. You know, where it's just around the corner, we have a climbing wall with these self-security systems. I don't know if you know them. So I climbed a bit with somebody securing me, which is fine. If you let go, you're immediately, you're stuck, but in a good way, you're safe. The self-securing thing, it's like a seatbelt. So when you let go, there's a split second where you're in free fall and it feels like forever. It's probably not even a second, even if you're just up to 2-3 meters, to consciously let go. I'm quite a courageous person and I literally have to count down 3, 2, 1 to let go. And that's where I want to take leaders and then debrief, because that's feeling courage in your body. And you don't have to climb up all the way to the top. You just climb up a little bit. But the moment of letting go, it's the same challenge. So that's the type I want to do, so that people can feel again. I feel like we're too much in our heads. And I want to get people back into their bodies and really experience things. I also want to take the mountaineering into the French Alps, but that's maybe in the next step. So that's on the mindset mastery bit. On the what, I call it lifestyle prototyping. And as I mentioned before, the whole idea is to have small experiments, proof of concept. It's really inspired by agile project management, to really say, like, just get started. Don't wait until it's perfect. Just define a small beta and then do it and see how it goes. And then you see what you learned. And then from there, you either keep going or you do something else, but really get people into action, because that's where you start moving.
Yeah, I love that. And another quote that I can't remember where I heard it from, but it was something along the lines of action alleviates anxiety. And a lot of times, entrepreneurs, you're starting, there's a lot of things you should be doing. And sometimes you can kind of get caught up in the analysis or the paralysis through analysis. And sometimes the solution really is just taking that action, just moving, however small it can be, and just kind of going forward. But I really wanted to ask you, because as you were talking about the courage and kind of letting go with that rock climbing, it kind of had me thinking, how do you, growing and helping develop this courage, how do you help make sure that it doesn't become recklessness?
Hmm.
Because I was thinking that, and because, yeah, I know you're safe there, but maybe what happens if you take that away from there and you're trying something else and you're like, oh no, I'm usually safe. Like, how do you prevent courage from becoming recklessness?
Wow, that's a really good question. I hadn't thought about that yet, but maybe I hadn't thought about it yet because, I tend to do rather dangerous sports, or I tried a few of them. So, I'm a skier, but I've also been skiing quite a bit off piste. And I remember the first time a good friend of mine took me close to Mont Blanc onto a glacier, and he gave me the whole security brief. And when you do that, you also take an avalanche GPS. I mean, you take the risk, but throughout, maybe not so much throughout my professional life, but throughout my sports adventure life, also traveling and backpacking, I always took an approach where I took calculated risks. So yes, you cannot live without risk. Also, as an entrepreneur, I guess you have to take risks, but you have to kind of almost scenario plan and think about, okay, what is the worst case scenario and how can I prevent that? And when you get at it with that mindset, that stops you from getting reckless. But then I guess it's also a personality thing. Maybe there are some people that are just, by nature really wanting to push the limits and go beyond the limits. And that might, of course, happen. And yeah, I haven't crossed that person yet, but you're right. Maybe I should prepare for that. If I open that Pandora's box, if then people go wild, you have to find a way to slow them down or at least keep it safe.
Yeah. Yeah. And I know you had mentioned freedom before in one of the 3 F's, correct?
Yes.
I want to, as we're kind of running towards the end here, I want to be courteous of the time. I'm interested. So what does freedom mean to you now?
So freedom means a lot of things, but most of all, it's also freedom of peace of mind, if you will. That's when you break with that old script, when you let go of all those shoulds and what people think you should be doing and the success you should be having. That alone already gives freedom. The other type of freedom I'm exploring with right now. So I'm building for myself what I call a portfolio career right now. And I'm also meaning to then eventually help other people to do it too. Because what I noticed, and when you get closer to 50, finding a new job is not that easy. You're an entrepreneur. That's maybe, that comes with different challenges. But when you're looking for employed work, it becomes harder and harder. So actually, I have to become more entrepreneurial because there are many ways. Most people are extremely experienced. So you might be consulting, you might be advising, you might be doing a bit of coaching, a bit of you have to let go of that security of one job that pays you all the bills. But once you let go of that need for that security, actually it opens up a whole lot of freedom. At the moment, I'm horse riding Tuesday mornings and I'm skiing Friday mornings. And then, I get my work done at the other part of the days. But that for me is freedom too. That's just awesome. It's like, why would you live otherwise if you can live that way?
Yeah, I love that, and that's got to be pretty awesome. It's been a while since I've been out on the mountains for skiing, and it was one of my most favorite things to do. And hopefully, I get some of that freedom soon. And where I'm skiing every Friday. But if someone's listening and they're interested in kind of hearing more about your coaching, how do they get in touch with you? Where do they find you? If you're taking on new clients, by the way.
Yeah, no, I do. Obviously, the experiential work is primarily in Switzerland because it's hard to, make you touch a horse when you're on the other side of the world. But all the other work it doesn't matter where you're based. So I'm actually building a 6-month coaching program that I call Base Camp Boot Camp. So it will be inspired by this Everest Base Camp ideas. So absolutely, whoever is interested, please feel free to reach out. Easiest to catch me on LinkedIn. I also have a website which is in makeover. It's meggirombach.com. But easiest is LinkedIn. I'm, very active there. I'm happy to engage. So yeah, find me there and check out my podcast, Played by Your Rules.
Yes, I love it. Go subscribe and check out, and make sure to follow and connect with her on LinkedIn. And well, Meggi, I love this conversation. It was really great because I resonate a lot with what you're doing, and I could see a lot of parallels between our coachings. And I just enjoyed our conversation because I felt like we could dive in so much more. But I want to be courteous of your time. So thank you for being awesome and doing a lot of impactful stuff and connecting with people and putting yourself out and developing your frameworks and things that you're doing so you can continue to create better impact with the world.
My
But
pleasure.
before I let you go, though, I got one final question for you. If someone's listening to this and they're checking this out and they're really enjoying it and loving it because there's a lot of value, a lot of great stuff was shared. But if there's one thing that you want somebody to remember or walk away with from this episode, what is it that they hope or that you hope that they keep with them and carry on going forward?
Take mindfulness seriously. I heard about it before my second burnout, and it was kind of like the nice to have thing. It was, this is cool. I should do this more often. And of course, I never did. Until only last year, I did the full for 8 weeks mindfulness-based stress reduction program. And then I did the mindfulness flow for work program. And, it's not like the yogi thing. This is for high performers too, because it's how you use it. You can most sports people use it. You can totally use that for high performance. So I heard from people, don't talk so much about mindfulness. People will react to that. It's like, no, that's bullshit. Just let go of any preconception you might have about it. Don't think about it, the yogi meditating on his yoga mat. Just try it out. It's a powerful tool for stress reduction, but also just to kick ass and be performing, but being in a more chilled and balanced way. So that would be my call to listeners.
Oh my gosh, I love it. Thank you so much for bringing that to attention, because I believe that to be so true. And mindfulness, I know when I'm very consistent with my meditation, it almost feels like a cheat code. I feel like everything just starts working and falling into place. So I love that. And thank you so much. I love everything you're doing. Very inspiring, and I resonate so well. So keep going and keep pushing and creating that impact out there. So thank you again for coming on today.
My pleasure.
That's all for today's episode of Surviving the Side Hustle. If you found value here, please don't forget to rate and review the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you're listening from. And please create a shared success by helping us share this episode with someone who you think would benefit from today's conversation. And finally, don't forget to connect with us at survivingthesidehustle.com and give us a follow on socials so that we can take part in following along in your entrepreneurial journey. Until next time, remember, success doesn't require a complete sacrifice, just strategy, momentum, and the right support.